Hello, everybody. Pascal here from Neutrality Studies, and we are currently witnessing a meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, this time in Tianjin, China. And this is another one of those multilateral events that we really need to cover in detail to see how the current world order is moving from the Euro-Atlantic dominated world of the West or the collective West into its new multipolar, multinodal, multilateral future of the 21st century. Now, what is happening at the moment? You're seeing here on this first picture all of the attendees of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's meeting of the heads of state, the highest organ of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where not only the direct members were present, but also a couple of others. Let me explain this just for 1 second, because in the news recently we were mostly focused on the BRICS, right? And the BRICS is its own grouping. This thing here, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is its own international organization, and it is a proper organization in contrast to BRICS, which is, and I said that before, BRICS is, you should imagine BRICS to be more or less like the G7 or like the G20, which is a gathering of states that has been ritualized and formalized, and in which the heads of states and heads of governments and so on meet every so and so often, usually once a year, and then they have subgroups and subcommittees in which some of their working groups then meet and try to formulate common common practices for their shared aspirations, whereas this organization, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is more formalized. So first of all, you have proper membership, and you have a secretariat which is located in Beijing, China, and you have then ambassadors that are permanently representing their countries to the organization. So in this sense, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is more akin to ASEAN, the Association for Southeast Asian Nations. It's more akin to one of the formal groups that also has like more institutional backbone and formalization. And you are seeing here on this map the members. The dark green ones are permanent, are the proper members. There's 10 of them. Most importantly, the entire organization is built around China and Russia. Is also reflected in the fact that the official languages of this organization is Chinese and Russian. But its core members also include the Central Asian countries of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and then the newer members that joined just a couple of years ago, of Pakistan and India, both which are full members, and recently also Iran, that joined the organization, and Belarus here at the in Europe. So this is a proper Eurasian organization. We have a couple of countries that then participate as observers, like Mongolia. We have states that participate as dialogue partners, which is not a full member or an observer, but which is states that have signaled their interest in the organization. Most importantly, Turkey is one of those dialogue partners, and then we have Saudi Arabia and Egypt as well. We have Nepal as well. We have Myanmar and Sri Lanka. And overall, the meeting that took place this time, the one here, also included these dialogue partners. Now, what's very interesting about this is, of course, that with Turkey, we have even a NATO member country as a dialogue partner of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And this is most interestingly represented in a meeting that took place at the sideline of today's / yesterday's main meeting, where let me show it to you here. President Putin actually met with President Erdogan of Turkey. And I would like to point out just how big this entire affair here is, and the importance that especially the Russians also put into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as a vehicle of of shaping the new multilateral world order. Let me show you here. We are on the homepage of the not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, on the Kremlin. This is the Kremlin, so the Russian president's homepage, and you can see here in its English version there are currently 3 articles that talk about what the president of Russia has been up to. A first article on his comments during the meeting of the State Council, the heads of the meeting of the heads of state during in the SCO. So when I say SCO, I mean always Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I will abbreviate that. We have an article on the meeting with Mr. Erdogan, and we have an article on the meeting with Mr. Modi. So the Russia obviously puts extremely much emphasis on just how important this organization is. And again, we've focused a bit more on BRICS in the past because this is the newest grouping, and it is a larger grouping that then also includes, of course, African and American, South American states. But the Shanghai Cooperation Organization has this big benefit of having been there for already a while and having also a security component. BRICS, of course, has no security component, or at least that's not a primary focus. Whereas for the Shanghai the SCO, there is even an entire arm of the SCO, an administrative arm that deals with counterterrorism and security matters of the bloc. So the SCO is not an alliance, though. It's very important to understand that this is an international organization that it brings together these countries time and again, right? And in which they do policy coordination and then try to build common infrastructure. But it is very, very far away from being anything like NATO. They do not share their militaries. They do not do large military cooperation. They do the counterterrorism cooperation through this grouping, but it's in no way or shape or form an alliance. Now, let me just read to you. This is so interesting. The statement that Vladimir Putin made. So the whole point about this, about for third states or like associate states to go to this venue, is that you can meet also the leaders of the core group, and this is obviously something that Mr. Erdogan wanted to do. And again, it signals that the unity in NATO is not at all as strong as one could assume, and especially for a country like Turkey, which historically and currently has always been dancing on all the weddings it could get entrance to. This is one of the moments through which Mr. Erdogan can show also to his NATO partners that they're not the only game in town. The Europeans are not the only game in town, and Turkey is playing with everybody and actually trying to be inside the organizations of various factions. Although I must say that the SCO does not explicitly not brand itself as an anti-NATO. It does not brand itself as an anti-West. It is part of this BRICS spirit of being not the West and just doing things their own way. Let me just read to you how Vladimir Putin actually addressed Mr. Erdogan to give you a sense of what he was of what kind of appeal he was going for. So Mr. Putin addressed his guest or his friend, Mr. Erdogan, by saying, "Mr. President, dear friend, I am very glad to see you and greatly value our personal contacts, which are always conducted in a constructive and mutually respectful manner." I'll skip a little bit. He also talks about that he's satisfied with the dynamics of trade and economic cooperation, and that the large-scale investments that are being carried out on a reciprocal basis. Mr. Putin really puts a lot of emphasis on the shared economic cooperation between them and how well this economic cooperation is working. This, to me, is of course a very strong hint toward the Western powers that look, even though you're trying to portray this unity, but with Turkey we have a member of NATO that is not at all on board, although as we all know, Turkey is always playing a double game, and Turkey has also been sending support and weapons to Ukraine in much smaller numbers than what Western countries did. But the support for Ukraine has, of course, been there also from Turkey, and we know that Russia and Turkey are having large disagreements and a very large rivalry when it comes to West Asia, the Middle East, to Syria, and that Mr. Putin was anything but happy with Mr. Erdogan for his role, especially in Syria and in overthrowing the Assad government. But nevertheless, one of the things that we need to just realize is that Mr. Putin is more than willing toward the outside world to portray the relationship with Turkey in general as a good one, and as one that he would be interested in growing even further. And again, in this small little passage, he even talks about our partnership in the energy sector, which is truly strategic. So he he keeps emphasizing that Turkey is a partner that he values, and how much he actually believes in these words, and how much actually uh, um, how much he really thinks about Mr. Erdogan. That's of course for him that only he would know. But the interesting part to me is really that he's willing to state that publicly, and also put it on the homepage of the Kremlin to just say, like, look, Turkey is somebody we can work with. Turkey, even though we have very serious even security disagreements, we can work together and welcome. We're happy to talk at the sidelines of all of these venues. So I don't think this is an approach of Russia trying to break Turkey away, but it is definitely an olive branch to Mr. Erdogan to say, like, look, if you ever have too many problems with the NATO guys, I mean, over here there's also some benefit to be had. Although at the moment I don't know of any talks about Turkey actually joining the SCO. But the current way in which the interaction happens seems to be working quite fine. Then the other meeting that took place and took a lot of headlines as well is the one with Mr. Modi, and here too Mr. Putin actually on the Kremlin homepage has quite an extensive address to him. And he talks a lot about the cooperation, and even more so, he speaks about multi-level cooperation with India, and he puts a lot of emphasis on the shared values between the two and the deep and historical ties that these countries have been enjoying. Let me read a couple of passages to you. Russia and India have maintained special, friendly, and trust-based relations for decades. This is the foundation for the future development of our ties. These relations are entirely above party politics and enjoy the support of the overwhelming majority of our peoples. Mr. Putin thereby, of course, then emphasizing that this is not just a personal matter, but this is a matter of national interest, and the countries Russia and India that should cooperate and have been cooperating for a long time. It's by now also clear that India is not willing to give in to U.S. pressure for ending its energy relationship with Russia, the way that Donald Trump just decided to have 50% tariffs on India as a punishment for still buying Russian oil, something that I've covered in previous programs. Let me just also point out then that Mr. Modi here also on this readout is reported as replying in his address to Mr. Putin. Here now Mr. Modi is saying that, Your Excellency, dear friend, I'm very glad to see you. Every time we meet, I feel a special connection. It gives us the opportunity to exchange views on a regular basis across a wide range of issues. Mr. President, this demonstrates the depth and comprehensiveness of our special privileged strategic partnership. Even under the most difficult circumstances, India and Russia have always moved forward together, shoulder to shoulder. Our close cooperation matters not only for the peoples of our two countries, but also for ensuring global peace, stability, and prosperity. Mr. Modi here definitely underscores that these difficult times, even the times now when the US puts sanctions on everybody, and when also Russia is going through sanctions and India is going through tariffs, that there is a very strong case for cooperation. Interestingly, Mr. Modi um, then adds a final statement. And the statement is on Ukraine, and I just would like to read it to you, and then let's interpret it. Mr. President, regarding the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, we exchanged views regularly. We welcome all recent efforts to establish peace and hope that all parties will approach this issue constructively. Ways must be found to bring the conflict to a swift and a secure peace. This is the call of all humanity. That Mr. Moody actually put that little passage in a relatively short address to Mr. Putin, underscores again that while India is not willing to give in to US demands completely, India is very cognizant of the fact that the Ukraine war and conflict is a major obstacle toward a better also South-to-South relationship, and that India would care about and cares a lot about ending this conflict. And it's just interesting that Mr. Moody doesn't leave that out, but actually does mention the importance of bringing back actual peace also to the European part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Because again, of course, the SCO has a border with Ukraine through Russia and Belarus, and that India says we care about this. Puts a little bit of pressure, of course, on Russia, and takes also the wind out of the sails of the Europeans and the Americans when they keep pressuring India about its stance on the war. So India can consistently say that they've always been urging a return to peace and a return to diplomatic exchange, also in their relationship with Russia. But it just shows a very, I would say, grown-up and a mature approach toward negotiating with others, which is very different from the US-European approach that constantly works with threats of all different kinds of reprisals if their demands are not met. This is not the way the Shanghai Cooperation Organization interacts among each other. And I just need to point out, maybe at this juncture already, there's just a very large difference between a picture like this, in which heads of states and representatives of the countries meet as equals and discuss on eye level, and pictures like this, in which the President of the United States basically calls the European so-called leaders to his office to lecture them in front of his desk about the expectations of the United States in relationship to their countries. So really, I think the current moment is a very interesting one, also captured in photographs about how states just interact with each other, and that within the BRICS framework and within the SCO framework, we do have an understanding that even though there are large differences in preferences and opinions, we do have a shared kind of minimal respect for each other's sovereignty and integrity. And of course, the war between Russia and Ukraine are an obstacle to this. Interestingly enough, Mr. Putin himself comes back to this issue in his address to the Council of the Heads of State. And the Council of the Heads of State within the SCO is the supreme decision-making organ. It is the highest kind of meeting venue where the presidents tend to meet, although a couple of prime ministers are in there as well. I mean, Mr. Modi is a prime minister, not a president, but because he basically has the function of a head of state, and he's the strongest political figure, he's in that council. This is where they all then come up with these the plans for the next steps. The council meetings themselves are, of course, more or less ceremonial. The real work is done by the actual diplomatic exchanges and by the details that are hammered out later on. And this is then the place where they can meet and also sign off on the final documents and the outcome document that in the end will be produced. Now, let's go into the remarks, which are quite long. Here I'm just showing them to you. The length of the speech that Mr. Putin held in this meeting of heads of states of the SCO. And I will not go through everything, but highlight a couple of his statements for you to see just how much value Mr. Putin also puts, the Russians put on the SCO itself as a venue, as an avenue, and a outlet to push for the multilateral 21st century. He says toward the beginning of his speech, the UN Charter enshrined fundamental principles, the primacy of international law, the right of nations to self-determination, sovereign equality, non-interference in internal affairs, and respect for the independence and national interest of every state. These principles remain valid and unshakable to this day. It's very fascinating to me that Mr. Putin actually again uses this moment to emphasize that he's in full support of the UN system. Something also Mr. Xi does, by the way, and we will look at that in just a moment, that the SCO is in complete agreement that the UN principles and the UN fundaments are the fundaments for the next, for this century, and that the problem is not the United Nations itself and its principles. The problem is that certain states just polarize and actually take disproportionate advantage of their rights within such organizations. Now, let's go back. Mr. Putin also says that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is also built on these very principles. It brings together like-minded partners committed to shaping a just multipolar world order. I am not sure if Mr. Putin before has used this expression of the multipolar world order, but here certainly it is, and it is an aspiration. It is a strategic goal of the Russians, also of the Chinese, and of the rest of the BRICS states, the SCO states as well, to have a multipolar proper order. And the SCO, since it has a security component, is even more a venue for Mr. Putin to actually share the Russian vision of shared security, which is something that he keeps coming to back time and again. He says that we advocate the issuance of joint bonds by the SCO member states, the establishment of our own payment, settlement, and depository infrastructure, and the creation of a bank for joint investment projects. This is highly fascinating, right? Because again, we've been talking about BRICS currency, we've been talking about BRICS infrastructure, but the SCO is actually a outlet that is also very useful to establish new financial architecture and have a infrastructure built in order to not just circumvent, but to rival the infrastructure that so far, ever since the end of the Cold War, was so much dominated by the West, including, of course, the SWIFT banking system, from which Russia was cut off overnight back in 2022, and something that now these states of the SCO and the Global South in general are working overtime to substitute with their own mechanisms, systems that other countries also can be plugged in and keep the world economy going, even if the United States and Europe try to pull the plug whenever one of them doesn't behave the way that they find acceptable. So here we have it. The Russians also thinking of the SCO, of course, as one avenue. He continues by again emphasizing genuine multilateralism. I find this fascinating too, that this word of multilateralism keeps coming up time and again. The emphasis on the equality of states. He says that it helps lay the political, socioeconomic foundations for a new system of stability, security, and peaceful development in Eurasia. A system that would replace outdated Eurocentric and Euro-Atlantic models, take into account the interests of the widest possible range of countries, and be genuinely balanced, thus preventing attempts by some states to ensure their own security at the expense of others. Russia is all about its concept of shared security. It's all about actually now the transcontinental approaches Eurasian approaches, and he explicitly frames this as in opposition to Eurocentric and Euro-Atlantic models of security, namely the NATO approach, which, as we know by now, is really one of a hammer and a nail. Whenever the United States isn't happy with what's going on, it just actually asks its vassal states to join it, and then berates them in the Oval Office and gives its orders. So NATO really being an instrument, of course, of US hegemony, of US imperialism around the globe, and its implementation partners out down to the war implementation partner of Ukraine being used as instruments. And that is the transatlantic worldview of how to create an international world. Now, Mr. Putin is saying explicitly that for the Russians, for the Chinese, for the SCO members, and for BRICS in the larger sense, that is not the model. The model is one of true multilateralism, and they emphasize this many times over. So he then, and toward the end of his speech, talks about Ukraine. It shows that the Russians are very much aware that of course, what they're saying about shared interest and shared security, the war in Ukraine flies in the face of that, right? We are here at a point where Ukraine and Russia are at a hot war, and it's not just Russia; it is the collective West that is fighting a war here. So how do you square that? Mr. Putin says that this crisis did not arise from Russia attacking Ukraine, but from a coup d'état in Ukraine, supported and provoked by the West, followed by attempts to use military force to suppress the regions and people of Ukraine who rejected and did not accept that coup. The second reason for the crisis lies in the West's constant efforts to draw Ukraine into NATO, which, as we have repeatedly and consistently stressed over many years, represents a direct threat to Russia's security. So the fact that he says all of this right in front of the other heads of states of the SCO shows that the Russians are aware that the war in Ukraine is, of course, something that its partners care about, and that its partners would rather want to see finished sooner than later, but that this is only one of several issues that need to be discussed. It is interesting here that he says there's two reasons for this, right? The fact that the West attempted the West uses Ukraine as a staging ground for its proxy war. And these constant efforts, as well as, of course, the historical development of the concrete conflict. So he basically says in this part that there's an internal matter, an internal issue that is fueling the war, the coup d'état, and what's happening in the Donbass, and the external component with the West using and abusing Ukraine, and that he explains that to his partners, and his partners who then, like India, talk about this, but obviously at this point rather seem to be understanding what Russia is doing. And this is, of course, again, flying in the face of the propaganda in Western media that tries to portray Russia as isolated. And even though states like India and China are not in support of the Russian military activities in and around Ukraine, but they are far away from trying to put sanctions on Russia. But the opposite is the case at the moment. They are discussing cooperation and deepening of ties. Let me go back and read you 3 more sentences from what Mr. Putin he said. In this context, we highly value the efforts and proposals of China, India, and other strategic partners aimed at facilitating the settlement of the Ukraine crisis. And I will, of course, provide colleagues with more detailed information on the results of the talks in Alaska. So naturally, for a Ukraine settlement to be sustainable and lasting, the root causes of the crisis that I have just mentioned and have spoken about many times before must be addressed. I'm skipping a little bit here to just the points that I find are important, but here again we do see how Russia is very mindful. Mr. Putin is very mindful of not leaving anybody, leaving doubt on the minds of Russia's partners, especially China, now also India, about what the strategy of Russia is, and how Russia is approaching the proxy war in Ukraine, and that they themselves would welcome an ending to this, but an ending that again takes into account the root causes, and root causes, of course, being something that Russia has been talking about for the last 3 years constantly, and that they're also using in their approach towards the United States, towards the Europeans. This is a standard diplomatic now practice of Russia to remind the Europeans that the only way to settle this conflict is by actually addressing the root causes, which include a security structure that needs to be built. And no better place to emphasize this than the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is also built as a Eurasian way of creating also shared security, in first and foremost by doing joint counterterrorism, but having certain principles in interstate relations. So this is a perfect venue to drive this point home, and the fact that he included this this issue to me signals that Russia is very confident in the understanding of its partners about what is going on. Let's now just quickly also look at what the Chinese are saying, because again, this was a big council meeting. The Xi Jinping then naturally would open that meeting and with his own remarks. And on the Chinese homepage of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we find his remarks. I found them very much focusing on the civilizational issue and the fact that this is a very large gathering of states that then if they combine their forces and if they combine their markets, they should have very large leverage over also others, and should not let themselves be bullied individually, but stand together, which makes a lot of sense. Mr. Xi Jinping then comes to 5 principles on which he thinks that the SCO should go forward. He says, first, we should seek common ground while putting aside differences, which is really significant in my view, since again, as we can see here, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization includes members that are almost at war with each other. I mean, just remember that India and Pakistan exchanged fire across their border only a couple of months ago, and that also India and China still have border disputes, and that the entire US strategy around China and with India is built on the idea of using India within the Five Eyes and within the Quad team as a counterweight to China, and basically, use India to counter Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific. And this is the way that the Chinese are approaching this, and now also the Indians are approaching it, is by saying like, look, we are aware that we have differences. We're aware that we have very, very severe border disputes and even mini wars among each other. But that doesn't mean that we need to go to all or nothing. That doesn't mean that we cannot cooperate in all the spheres, and we all have a joint interest in this, right? Even Pakistan and India have still an interest in cooperating, and this is the new multilateral framework that is not a good against evil, all or nothing approach. It is a graduated approach to international affairs. So he emphasizes this aspect. He says, then secondly, we should pursue mutual benefit win-win results. Third, we should champion openness and inclusiveness. Fourth, we should uphold fairness and justice. And here, let's just read this one sentence. Mr. Xi Jinping says that we should safeguard the UN-centered international system and support the multilateral trading system with the WTO at its core. We should advocate an equal and orderly multipolar world and universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization, and make the global governance system more just and equitable. Again, very interesting remarks, because it just signals how much China has an interest in upholding and upkeeping the organization's that are already there, the international mechanisms that are already there. China is not here to replace any of them. The SCO is not here to replace them, but the SCO is here to supplement and add additional avenues in order for these for the multipolar world to really arise. Fifth, he says we should strive for real results and high efficiency. So keep building. And Mr. Xi Jinping, of course, emphasizes the importance of the Belt and Road Initiative, this connectivity initiative and this investment initiative that also goes far beyond the SCO limits, goes to Africa, goes to South America, goes to Europe, of course, and how China is mainly interested in this, what he also called above the win-win results that can be achieved. There's a second statement that was done by Mr. Xi Jinping in the extended round, where also the non-member states, the observer states, and the partners were invited to join. And in this address, he also had a few interesting remarks. Additionally, where he said that we should contribute to safeguarding world peace and stability. We should continue to uphold the principles of non-alliance, non-confrontation, and not targeting any third party. We should combine our effort and addressing various threats and challenges. This, to me, that he said this in a setting in which then also Mr. Erdogan would be present and others as well, is interesting, because he basically supports the idea of neutral third states, that they do not necessarily need to join the SCO, that they do not need to be close partners, but that the principle of the multipolar world should be one in which third states, neutrals, are being left to their decisions, and no pressure should be exerted. Also a very, very strong hint toward the United States, that is currently trying to pressure third states. I mean, the whole affair with India, with the tariffs, and the whole idea of putting secondary sanctions in order on states that do not follow the US orders and commands. That's, of course, the antithesis to this one, right? So we should not expect to see any kind of secondary sanction idea from SCO members anytime soon. It flies in the face of the principles that they are now trying to establish. Let me read one more part. We should step up to take the responsibility for open cooperation across the globe. SCO member states have rich energy resources, big markets, and strong internal driving forces, and we are contributing a rising share of world economic growth. We should continue to dismantle walls, not erect them. We should seek integration, not decoupling. We should advance high-quality Belt and Road cooperation and push for universal beneficiary and inclusive economic globalization. Here you go. This is it. Like the vision of this very large grouping of states, and the positive atmosphere in which this all was held. I mean, it shows in the pictures. It shows in the meetings between Modi, Mr. Putin and Mr. Xi, that they do have a common understanding. We see, when we look very briefly into Western media, that of course the Washington Post and the New York Times and so on, they frame all of this as just a reaction to the West, because that's again part of the solipsism of the West, that they think the world revolves around them, and when these states meet, then they do so in reaction to themselves. I mean, the New York Times has headlines like "Smiles and clap hands as Xi, Putin, and Modi try to signal unity." No, they're not trying to signal unity, the Washington Post. They are building unity. They're not trying to signal. They are building unity. This other headline here I also find wonderful. "Xi uses summit, parade, and history to flaunt China's global pull." Well, you know, the naturally, like hosting such an event is also a wonderful moment to actually create a shared understanding, right, of the past and the present. And the New York Times here then, for further down in the article, criticizes China for trying to put a different emphasis, right, for emphasizing that the Second World War was fought mainly by Russia, by the Soviet Union and China, and that Russia and Asia, Eurasia, was a big theater instead of the Western narrative of Europe being the main theater, and the US coming to the aid of Europe and rescuing us all from Nazism, right? So it's very interesting also in this article here that then toward the end, the article even talks about um, a history war. I wonder if I can find it right now. Well, it talks about a war of memory, of how the China and Russia tried to recast the Second World War. But this is, of course, utter nonsense. Of course, large parts of the Second World War, the largest parts were fought in the Asian theater. The long Second World War pretty much started in 1931 when Japan first attacked China, and it ended also here in September, and 2nd of September 1945, when the Japanese finally surrendered. But all of this is, of course, part of this Western game of trying to make the world believe that everything just revolves around them. Now we are seeing that this is not working anymore. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is there, BRICS is there. The states are asserting their importance, their dominance, their historical memories, their narratives, and they are thereby building the multipolar world, not against the West, but they just build it despite the West. So they just go ahead anyway, and that is something that you can try to right away. That's something that you can bemoan, and something that you can talk about with very over loaded moralism, as most newspapers in the West do, and as Western leaders are repeatedly doing. But it's not something that will go away. This is the new multipolar reality that is being constructed right in front of us, and it is not a black and white scheme. It is a world in which rivals work together, in which sometimes even enemies work together, and it is hopefully a framework for more cooperation. We can see this new vision of the multipolar world, even with Mr. Erdogan from Turkey cooperating in it. We can see it with the way that Pakistan and India are cooperating in it, and China. And I would say this must really scare the transatlantic crowd, that that pictures like this, where the boss talks to his satellites, to his minions, are gonna be this is the outgoing model, and the BRICS and Shanghai model. This is the future, and I leave you with this. Thank you very much for your attention.